Okay, guys, we have Brian McCormick, author, coach, consultant, referee. What other titles, man, did I not get?
That's probably it right now.
PhD, doctor, sorry.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him. You guys are in for a treat tonight. He's a great clinician. He talks on different subjects. If you don't know him, he's the 180 shooter. He has Blitz. He has crossover, his original. He has Saba, 21st century. I coach way more than that. I'm probably forgetting them all, but I named probably the false fundamentals, I think, is one of them.
Yeah, fake fundamentals.
Fake fundamentals. So lots of great content on him. So without further ado, Brian, the floor is yours. I'm just here to assist you, and hopefully we have a great session tonight.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation, the nice intro and everything. Yeah, I mean, I think I have like 20 books now, so I forget some of them too. Yeah, so Blitz Basketball, like we were talking offline before, I kind of, when I wrote Crossover, which was kind of my first book in like 2005, I got some people that were asking, like, how can I agree with the philosophy, but how can I implement it a little bit more specifically? And so Blitz Basketball was kind of an attempt to give that, like, how can you take the basic philosophy of, developing, technical and tactical skills, physical skills, mental skills all together, and make it, I guess, a little bit more practical for players or for coaches to take, something directly to practice tonight, or directly into, the offense that they're going to run this season. And so, I wrote it in about 2006. It was based primarily on stuff that we did when I was coaching at Hoop Masters in Los Angeles. In like 2001, I think I coached a boys team, with Jerome Green, kind of oversaw us, because his son Pharaoh was on our team. And then it was myself and Ahmad were coaching, and this was kind of, the progression. I had come from coaching a college, being a college assistant coach, and I left that and came back to work with 9-year-olds with Hoop Masters. And so when we started out, I was kind of the college mindset and drills and individual workouts, and we got to improve individual fundamentals and things like that. And then as we went along, Jerome kept pushing me, and he was like, you need to play more, you need to play more, you need to play more. These are 9-year-olds, they need to play. They're not going to learn just by doing drills and stuff like that. So that's kind of how a lot of my basic philosophy developed, but also what this book is more or less based upon is the system of drills, and then ultimately the philosophy that we use to kind of develop players while we are trying to also, compete and become a competitive AAU team, and we ultimately, went to AAU national championships, which I know seems kind of crazy that an under-9 team is going to a national tournament in Memphis, Tennessee, but, such is life. So our basic idea when we started out is, Hoop Masters was a, club that had teams all the way into high school, but, primarily from, under-9s through junior high, but into high school. And so, when we looked at it, we were like, as our one team, we don't need to teach every single skill, or make sure that we've, tried to master every single skill at this age group, because, we want to develop certain things, and then our under-10 coach can build on what we did as 9-year-olds, and then the 11-year-old coach can build on what we did as 10 years old and stuff like that. So the 4 things that we kind of thought, how can we, what can we actually master at this age group, with 9-year-olds, what can we master? And so that was ball handling, layups, on-ball defense, and then we just wanted players to learn how to play hard and learn how to be competitive. So that's kind of the foundation of what we were trying to do with the overall system. And then as we built the basic principles that the offense developed upon were kind of based on what I call my hard to guard mentality, which actually came from a book that I wrote for somebody else back in like 2002. And it was the idea that players are most open when they first receive a pass. One defender can't stop one offensive player. And then if you draw a second defensive player, that's when you need to find the open player. So offensively, those were kind of our three major things that we were trying to develop, both from a technical standpoint, a tactical standpoint, but really from a mindset standpoint of you can't let one defensive player guard you. You know, so to have that mindset, you also have to have those skills. You know, so that means playing a lot of one-on-one, playing a lot of 2-on-2, so we could develop the ball handling skills and making the layups, so that we really had that mindset that if we only see one defensive player in front of us, we're attacking that player. If we draw that second player, that's where we need to find, you know, the open man. So the reason for, you know, this specific system was, you know, I'd come from, you know, growing up as a player being, you know, running flex when I was at this age. You know, I didn't even play at this age, but, you know, kind of my beginning years, you know, from 5th to 8th grade, we always ran flex. And we spent so much time at practice just running 5-on-0 offense, 5-on-0 offense. And when we were running the offense, we weren't really doing anything to develop any kind of skills. And so, you know, I understood that, you know, in this environment, we wanted to have a competitive team. You know, we needed to have some kind of organization that we could fall back on when we were in games, you know, even though everybody pressed and most of the game was just, you know, fast breaks and transition, but we needed to have something that we could fall back on and some kind of organization. And so the goal was that we could teach or develop technical skills, you know, dribbling, shooting, passing, at the same time that we were kind of developing a very simple framework of an offense. And so that was kind of the idea behind this, is all our one-on-one, 2-on-0, or sorry, 1-on-0, 2-on-0, 3-on-0 type drills. It was just building the basic kind of motion behind, you know, our offense. And so, but at the end of the day, they were also shooting drills, they were layup drills, they were dribbling drills, they were passing drills. You know, so we weren't just spending all our time running 5-on-0 offense and, you know, in a non-competitive setting, but our non-competitive 5-on-0 offense basically was our technical work. It was getting up our shooting repetitions. It was getting, you know, making passes off the dribble, jump stop, things like this. So along these lines, again, because we were initially working with 9-year-olds, it was important that our practices were active. And that was one of the biggest things is, you know, we didn't want to have a lot of lines. We didn't want to have a lot of people standing around. We wanted offense and defense in every drill, because that's how you play the game. And that's, you know, ultimately why they were there. You know, we were in an environment where we practiced twice a week, you know, and by the time players got through Los Angeles traffic, you know, we'd maybe have 90-minute practices. And so we wanted to get through as much as possible in a session. And so that meant less talking, and it meant more, you know, just playing and incorporating offense and defense in as many drills as possible. So again, we wanted lots of play. We wanted an environment for learning. And then we wanted it to be fun. Again, it's 9 years old. We wanted something the players enjoyed doing, enjoyed playing, and enjoyed coming to practice. You know, we really wanted them to be there, wanted them to want to be there. So to me, 3 keys, and, you know, this was back from 2006, 3 keys of developing successful players and successful teams is developing internal motivation, the desire to play, and a habit of playing hard. So again, those were 3 things that we were really trying to emphasize over and over. Is we wanted to, you know, I think in Deci and Ryan's paper, the self-determination theory, they talk about, you know, when you initially join an activity, you're already intrinsically motivated, right? You don't, you know, I mean, you can argue nowadays that may or may not be true because parents are forcing kids to do things, and maybe, you know, you sign up your child for sports at such a young age now that they really haven't even made the decision to play. But generally speaking, you know, when you sign up for basketball, it's because you have an interest in basketball. You want to play basketball. You know, you want to be on a team. You want to improve, et cetera, et cetera. So you already have an interest. You already have that intrinsic motivation. And so really what we're doing, it isn't so much as building intrinsic motivation as it is not turning that intrinsic motivation into extrinsic motivation. And so that means, you know, we want to try to avoid punishment. You know, we don't want players playing hard because, you know, we're going to force them to run if they don't play hard. We want players playing hard because that's what they know, that's what they enjoy, that's what's fun, that's how they're getting better, you know, and it's that kind of environment that continues and increases their intrinsic motivation as opposed to taking away from it. You know, and then, you know, just the desire to play. We wanted kids, we didn't want to have to force kids to come to practice. You know, I mean, I've talked about it, the two players who by the end of the year, one was Jerome's son, Pharaoh, and then another kid, David, they were the best ball handlers by the end of the year. And you would see them at the end of practice. You know, Pharaoh's dad was in charge, so he was usually the one that had to lock the gym, so he had to wait for everybody to get out of the gym. And then David's mom was always talking to the coaches afterwards and talking to Jerome and organizing things. So they were usually the last two to leave. And you would see them, you know, like I remember we practiced at, I think it's Hamilton High School in West LA. And, you know, there's like a little kind of foyer outside the gym. And so we'd close, you know, the doors to the gym, and we'd be trying to push everybody outside the foyer out onto the street. And, you know, it was probably, you know, 10 feet wide. And so as people were walking out, you'd see Pharaoh and David, and they'd be trying to get past each other just in this little, you know, 10-foot area, you know, and then we'd go outside on the sidewalk, and, you know, the parents would still be talking or whatever. And you'd see David and Pharaoh, and they'd be trying to get by each other on the sidewalk, you know, and stuff. And so, you know, practice had ended. We'd already gone 2 hours, you know, Pharaoh had probably been there even longer because his dad was in charge. And they just wanted to play. They just wanted to have fun. That's how they got better. And ultimately that's how they were, you know, almost impossible to take the ball off of them, because they spent so much time just doing this little one-on-one, just trying to get by each other in a really small area. And then again, the habit of playing hard, you know, I mean, to us, that was one of the biggest things, is just, you know, both coming down from the college level and working with children, and just, you know, just kind of watching the players who were good, you know, at that age. And it was really just the players who played hard and were aggressive were the ones that were better. And to us, if we could just get players to be competitive, to play hard all the time, that was going to put them in the right kind of mind frame and give them the right base to develop as they were moving forward, when they could develop their skills better. So finally, when I was developing these ideas, or when we were developing these ideas, basically I had 10 basic assumptions on which, you know, I based these. So the first one was that one-on-one in open space, the offense has the advantage. 2 is teams who make a lot of free throws win games. 3, when the defense is forced to scramble, more fouls are committed and more offensive rebounds are relinquished. We good?
Good. You're good, Coach.
Okay. Sorry. 4, offensive rebounds lead to fouls, points, and free throws. 5, turnovers are wasted possessions. 6, catching the ball already squared to the basket greatly improves a shooter's shooting percentages. 7, dribble penetration is the toughest action to defend. 8, most teams rely heavily on starters and see a drop off after their 4th or 5th player. So we were really trying to develop our full 10 or 12 person team and then take advantage of the depth. 9, offensive players are ill-equipped to handle pressure for an entire game. And then 10, forcing players to make decisions at a faster pace leads to mistakes. So those were kind of the basic ideas, you know, and especially at 9 and 10 years old. But I think those ideas or those assumptions carry forth almost all the way up through, you know, professional basketball. So those are kind of the basics, especially if the, you know, focus more on the offensive side of the system. So yeah, does anybody have any questions?
I'll start, Coach.
Okay.
I know you wrote it a long time ago, and now we're 2020, and the game's kind of changed, if you will, a little bit. How would it adapt? How would you change it to adapt to today? Would you keep it the same, or would you make tweaks and adjustments to what you were teaching back then?
I think to a certain extent, most of it would stay the same. I think it holds up pretty well over time. I think, how I would teach some of the specific skills I've probably evolved over time. I probably teach, how to use an on-ball screen, especially within a 5-person setup. I probably teach that a little bit differently. I would probably teach or try to develop a little bit more off-ball movement. And again, it depends on the age group that I'm working with. If I'm working with 9-year-olds, I think it probably fits to a certain extent. With college players, I would hopefully be able to evolve it a little bit more and add more wrinkles to make it a little bit more difficult. But I think most of the basic assumptions, like I said, and most of the things that I was trying to get, are things that I still believe in, in terms of, offensively, taking advantage of one-on-one situations, in terms of, I think if you catch the ball already square to the basket, you're going to be a better shooter than if you have to, come hard off a screen and catch and turn and face before you shoot, things like that. Defensively, if we can speed up teams and make them make decisions, quicker, I think that's to the defense's advantage. I think, I do think depth, if you can have quality depth, I think that does give you an advantage, because I do think teams will wear down if you can force pace on them. And I've seen that even to the college level, where as soon as teams try to go to their 4th or 5th option, they're in trouble, whereas we can, hopefully go 7 or 8, 9 deep, and not have too much of a drop off. From our best player to our 9th player, there's an obvious drop off, but we can there's not a huge drop off from like our 3rd to our 6th, or from our 5th to our 9th, and so things like that, I think, so I think it holds up pretty well over time. Like I said, with older players, I would just evolve it a little bit more, and I probably teach certain things a little differently now, just because of the way the game's changed.
Well, someone has your book, so they're asking a question. Some of the later chapters in Blitz, it talks about positions, types of players. Does this hold up in the modern positionless play?
We have a page number so I can see what I wrote.
He might. That's my boy, I think, in Australia that I was telling you about too.
Okay. Does he have a page number?
Give me a second.
All right.
I'll give you a sec.
I'm trying to find it. My guess is no, but
I'm trying to remember too. Is your Army is your Navy drill in Blitz?
Yeah, I believe so. Let's see. Okay, well, I just flipped through it. I can't find quickly what he's talking about, so I'll wait for the page number. But
so we got another A to Z course member here going. How much 1-on-1 would you do versus 2-on-2, 3-on-3? Do you like one?
I prefer 2-on-2 to 1-on-1, because I do play a lot of 1-on-1, but I think 2-on-2 is the best game, because it's the smallest number of players that you can have that incorporates every skill that you can use in the game. So I think 1-on-1 oftentimes can become unrealistic, because you don't have to worry about a help defensive player, and you never have the option of passing the ball. So you're strictly focused on the rim, which changes the way that you might, you might drive to the basket if you're potentially going to pass the ball, as opposed if you know, well, I'm either going to shoot a jump shot or I'm going to shoot a layup. You know, I know I have to shoot. So, you know, when I'm working on one-on-one, you know, my players probably don't know it, but most of the time when we're playing one-on-one, it's to work on defense. And then usually when we're playing 2-on-2, that's when we're focusing on offense a little bit more. And I would say we play 2-on-2 in every single practice. We probably play 3-on-3 in almost every single practice, and we play 5-on-5 in every single practice. One-on-one, I would say we play in almost every single practice as well. That tends to be our position breakdown work is where we'll play one-on-one. And again, it's, you know, I mean, we score it offensively, but we're more working on the defense, or, you know, in the post, we're working how to, you know, how we're going to deny our front in the post, whatever we're going to do. So, yeah. So, okay. So I found the positions. I saw it up. I saw the note.
37, chapter 7.
Right. You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the positions hold up pretty well. You know, those are kind of the positions that I would use. I would probably put, you know, I really like my point guard to be able to shoot threes. You know, as you can see how, you know, the NBA has evolved with guys like Curry and Dame and stuff like that. And you know, over the last 3 years, my point guard's been a really good 3-point shooter. So I'd probably, you know, maybe look for that a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, a point guard who can make plays, a combo guard who can score and ideally shoot threes, you know, a shooting guard who can shoot threes, a bigger fourth guard. You know, I mean, I think that's more or less how basketball has gone now. Is, you know, your power forward is almost more of a guard than a post player on most teams now. So, and then fifth, a strong finisher who can catch the ball around the basket. You know, I think that's important. You know, I'd like my center now to be a shooter as well, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. But if possible, you know, I think those fit pretty well, and that tends to be kind of what I look for, you know. And if I could find a 5 who can do those things and shoot the ball, that's even better. And if I can find a 1 that can do those things and shoot the ball, that's even better. But the rest of them fit pretty well. You know, I mean, you could look at our teams, and to a large extent, you would say that we play 4 guards.
This is a really good question, Brian, from Chris. How would you compare or contrast this system with the 5-out pass and cut style for youth players? What would be the major advantage in switching to your philosophy and or the drawbacks?
I think it just depends on what you want to emphasize. I think this might be easier for younger children just because I just think dribbling's easier than passing, you know, for young players. You know, maybe that's just because that's what I tend to emphasize. So that's what I end up with that, you know, as a result. But you know, I think trying to get a 5-out, the other thing, you know, and I see this, you know, I've meant to write about this, you know, at the NBA level, but, you know, I think the playoffs have really shown the problems with the 5-out system that doesn't put pressure on the rim. And so if your 5-out system, you know, isn't putting pressure on the rim with cutters or, you know, rollers to the basket off screens, I think it becomes easy to guard. You know, I think the better teams in the playoffs, you know, like the Heat, you know, you may not think of them as a 5-out team, but, you know, when they have Bam, he's usually playing in the high post. He's in dribble handoffs, you know, so, excuse me, to me, that's kind of a 5-out or at least a 4-out with a high post as opposed to a, you know, some kind of post player action. So, you know, but they're always putting pressure with cutters or rolling to the rim hard, and breaking down the defense in that way. So, you know, I think in 5-out, when everybody stays wide and you don't put enough pressure on the rim, I think you become easy to guard. And so I think, you know, with something like blitz, I think you're putting a little bit more pressure on the rim constantly. Now, obviously, that depends on how you run your 5-out and stuff like that. But so I mean, I do know that there is a definite portion of the population who is in favor of just passing and cutting for young players, and I can definitely see that as being valuable. So I don't want to say one's way is better than the other. I just kind of think that the way that youth basketball is played here, this system fits with the way that we tend to play basketball with youth players, whether that's good or bad. We may be contributing to the problem, but I just think that it fits, at least in all my experiences, it fits with, the kind of defenses that you play against and the types of players that you start with initially. Because to me, as much as we don't want winning to matter at youth ages, and I don't really care so much whether my team wins or loses, players need to feel successful. And whether that's individually successful or team, if you're on a team where you're, losing every game, getting killed every game, as much as your coach tries to build you up and as much as, that's not really that important. And at the end of the day, it does become discouraging, and I say that as somebody who probably the most fun I had on a team, in Little League baseball, I think we maybe won one game all year, one year, but we were all good friends and we had fun, but, the following year when we won TOC champs, that was more fun, so I think you can have fun being on a bad team, and you can still persist and play and motivate players and all those things if you do it right. But I think it's easier to feel like you're improving, and I think it's easier to maintain that intrinsic motivation and drive that interest and encourage players, to continue to work hard if they start to see some success, whether that's individual success or team success.
Okay, we got from Grant Morrow, we have, in regards to motivation and playing hard, in one of your books, you mentioned using competitive cauldron. Do you still use that method? And if so, what drills do you like to include in it?
I do. Like the last 3 years, I had a whiteboard, and I wrote out practice on the board every day. And so I took the whiteboard out to practice. It's actually something that I got from John Spera. He's now the UCLA head volleyball coach, and I think he's still the USA volleyball coach. But when he was at UC Irvine, I used to go to his practices. And so he'd do the same thing. And so I would write out my practice on the whiteboard, teams, everything for everything we were going to do at practice. And then after, a game, I would just circle, who won. And then I'd go to my office and pull up my, Excel spreadsheet and put in, who won, on that day. And I'd keep a track for the week, and I'd keep a track on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and then for the season. So I would know, so when a player came to me and was like, hey, you don't play me. And I was like, well, yeah, because you're 12th out of 12 out of 12 players in our competitive cauldron. That means you're getting your butt kicked every single day in practice. Your winning percentage in practice, and it's hard to be much. I think the best winning percentage we've had is right about 50%, because there's more drills have more losers than winners. It's not like, evenly split. If you're playing 2-on-2, you've got 2 winners and you've got 10 losers. So 50% has been our highest, winning percentage. But, if our lowest winning percentage is at, 28%, and you're at 28%, you're not winning a lot, so why do you deserve to play? You're not earning those minutes in practice. So I still use it. In terms of my favorite drills, it's every drill that we do. more or less, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, transition drills, 5-on-5, half court, full court, it's all of the above. More or less the only thing that I don't track winners on is if we do a kind of a block shooting drill, which we usually do one at the beginning of practice. But like if we do a competitive shooting drill, track it. When we play tag, track it. We play keep away as a passing drill, track it. So we keep track of all those things. And then I keep track of kind of who wins the drill. So I know who's like, if somebody's, dominating tag and never winning 5-on-5, like I kind of want to know that too. Because 5-on-5 means a little bit more to me than whether or not they can win in tag. So I still use it. I use it at the college level. I don't, at the college level, I didn't change my starting lineup or my captains like I've done at the high school level. At the high school level, I basically, on a game-by-game basis, just took the top 5 players for that week or up to that point in the competitive cauldron and said, okay, you're my 5 starters. And whoever was number 1, that was my captain for the day. I don't do that at the college level, but, if I was at the high school level again, I would probably do the same thing. Because, again, part of it is, I think when I coached at the high school level, especially when I coached girls at the high school level in Irvine, one of the reasons why we won the league is because our 10th player, on any given day, our 9th or 10th player could be our best player. And they're always engaged in practice because they knew everybody was going to play and everybody had a chance to start, based on what they were doing in practice. I just think the competitiveness of our practices enhanced everybody's abilities because we didn't have, a set starting lineup where these 5 are going to start, these 5 aren't going to play very much, and we're not going to go beyond our 6th or 7th player. So if you're the 10th man, you're never going to get in a game. And so now you've kind of checked out of practice. You're not really focused on the bench. And so if you do go in a game, it's like, oh, what? I'm going in a game? What are we doing? With our players, it was like they knew they were going in a game, and they knew that, so they knew they had to prepare and practice because they knew they were going to play, and they knew they had a chance that if they, went on a hot streak, they could probably get themselves into the starting lineup. So, I do use it, and I would use it in the same way at the high school level if and when I coach there again.
We got a couple follow-ups to your cauldron, and then we have some questions. So first one is, do you weight drills in your competitive cauldron? For example, are 5-on-5 worth more than 1-on-1 drill?
I don't, just because I'm just not good with Excel. So trying to figure out how to do that, is more time than I want to spend on it. But I do kind of look at it and if somebody's, to a certain extent, I know who's winning most of the 1-on-1s. With my teams, and then I look at 5-on-5, kind of on a daily and a weekly basis, one, to see if I need to mix up the teams or if, our post, especially our post point guard connection, like if the same 2 are playing together all the time, to make sure I'm mixing that up and stuff like that. But yeah, that's just too much Excel work for me to try to weight drills.
Now, another one is, we have built in a plus-minus system into our cauldron, in addition to just focusing on wins. For example, 2 points for a made shot or -1 for a turnover. We do this in our team sessions to identify who is consistently producing. What are your thoughts on that method?
It makes sense. It seems like it's getting a little bit more specific, and I think the negative of that is kind of I think the positive of the competitive cauldron is you're kind of essentially looking at the plus minus from basketball stats, that's basically what you're getting, right? Is a win essentially is your plus and a loss is a minus, you know, and so who's affecting over the course of time, who's affecting your winning the most. And I think if you start breaking it down into, you know, normal box score stats, then it starts to, you know, rely more on box score stats, you know, so, you know, the scores are going to tend to rise, and the, you know, players who don't score, maybe the player, and so maybe you miss something. You know, I think that's one of the things that I use the collagen for, is to see if I'm missing something in my normal, like I can see the girl who scores 20 points a game on my team, you know, and wins one-on-one almost every single time. You know, I can see that in practice. Like that's easy to see. But I might not notice the girl who's finishing third or fourth in the collagen, like, you know, why? Like, is she there, you know, because she's always in the right place on defense? Is she there because she's the one who talks on defense? Maybe, you know, I mean, we had 2 years ago, you know, I think it was the girl, I think she finished third or fourth. She was our center. She averaged like under 2 points a game for us, you know, and she didn't even get that. She wasn't even our leading rebounder as our center. So, but she was always in the right place, and she was always talking on defense, and she was so much better than our backup center, that her team tended to win, because that was kind of the biggest mismatch, if you will, even though she didn't score, and our backup center was a better scorer. So I think if you focus too much just on the points, maybe you miss something like that. And so, you know, because that's one of the reasons why I use the collagen, is to see if I'm missing something. I can see, you know, the obvious things, you know, but I'm really using it to make sure that when I'm watching my team play, you know, I'm not missing, you know, less obvious things, which typically tend to be on the defensive side, rebounding, just knowing where to be, you know, running the plays properly. If we're running a play, you know, playing hard, getting the loose balls, you know, those are the things that may go, you know, overlooked, especially if you're only focusing kind of on the box score stat type stuff.
So when you teach layups, do you teach kids to aim at the square, or is it better to take a more variable approach and get them to hit different spots on the backboard?
With beginners, you know, we're aiming for the square. I do like my friend Rick Allison down in Texas. He does his spinology, where he has, you know, players stand on the basket and just shoot the ball up, you know, and to work on knowing which kind of, you know, spin to put on the ball when you're coming from different angles and using different hands on different sides of the basket. So something like that I would incorporate as well. But I think initially, you know, start out with making the shots, you know, aiming for the top of the square, you know, and then as they start to do that, and as they start to, you know, vary their shots, you know, then be able to, you know, shoot it higher, get it lower, finger roll, different things where you're going to aim for, you know, kind of different locations.
This is a pretty good question here. If you were in charge of USA basketball, would your developmental system what would it look like for youth through high school? In a broad sense. I mean, that would take you that'd be a book for you, but.
I mean, to me, the biggest initial changes that I would make is starting out, players would play in 3-on-3 leagues, not 5-on-5. You would stay on lower baskets for a longer period and play with, you know, smaller basketballs for a longer time. Those to me are the, you know, every time somebody talks about, you know, a change to the rules or zone defense or, you know, pressing and whatever, to me, the answer is always play 3-on-3. If you're playing 3-on-3, it takes care of all of those problems. And then people talk about, well, you know, we need to develop shooters like in Europe. And that's a point that I've argued, because if you look at all the best shooters in the NBA, like 9 out of 10 of them are Americans. But but let's go with it. Europeans develop better shooters. In my experience, one of the major reasons why that may be true, again, based on my experience, our players in my last club, our boys didn't move to a 10-foot hoop until under 14s. So that means when they were 12, 13 years old, they're still playing on an 8.5-foot hoop. So they were not chucking the ball up at the basket, and granted, these players were smaller than the average 12 or 13-year-old playing in the States. Probably, a lot of late matures, especially, as a population. So, maybe that's why they needed to stay on a lower basket a little bit longer. But I mean, I had a 6'3" point guard on my team, and he was dunking his last year in as a 12, 13-year-old because he was playing on an 8.5-foot hoop. He was already 6'3". He was the one early mature, so he could dunk before he moved to a 10-foot hoop, when he was 13, 14 years old. So, but I just think that every time we talk about shooting problems, most of them originate with when players initially start playing. And it's because they're using a ball that's too big for their hands, which changes the way that you're going to hold the ball. And then you're shooting on a basket that's too high for you. I forget the math, but I mean, it's something like, if you take an average, third grader shooting on a 10-foot hoop, it'd be like an NBA player, shooting on like an 18-foot hoop or something, and we would think that's absurd, but we think it's appropriate for a third grader. So I just think, for me, those would be the first three changes that I would make. Lower the baskets, appropriately sized ball, play 3-on-3. And then once we get to 12, 13 years old, then we can start to, move the baskets up and move to 5-on-5 play and so on and so forth.
Okay. Next question for you, Coach, is with the importance of players making instant decisions within a split second in your system, how do you create players who think for themselves and are able to evaluate their decisions without being dependent on the coach? How do you balance that between tell to allow?
Well, I would say the biggest thing that we probably do is just develop confidence in players. And a big way that we develop confidence is just by not criticizing and not punishing for mistakes. Like I remember, just kind of the style that we coach and this, both during practice and during games. I remember, I forget who it was, might have been Bill at Oklahoma State, like he was in watching one of my players and just we're playing 2-on-2 and, girl would make a mistake and I kind of, stand back by the end of our line. And so they make their mistake, they lose or whatever, and they come and I just say something to them and then they get in line and they go again and the next girl comes and I just say something to him aside. So he came up to me after practice. He's like, guys, this is how you coach all the time. And I was like, yeah, I didn't know. I thought, it was before I got to know him. I thought he thought I was like putting on a show for him or something, but like, that's more or less every practice, that's kind of, especially with that drill, that's how I coach. Like it wasn't yelling and screaming. It wasn't stopping the play. It's just like, all right, hey, did you see this? Like, okay, you made this pass. What'd you see? Why did you make that pass? And so it's a matter of giving them confidence. So they're not scared to make that play. I think a lot of players play scared and they're so afraid to make mistakes. And, I was one of the worst teams in turnovers. Even when we were top 20 in the nation in offensive efficiency, I think we were like bottom 20 in turnovers, but it was part of the same thing. Like part of the reason why we were good was the same reason why we committed a lot of turnovers is because we would make behind the back passes with 2 minutes to go in a, 4-point game just to get somebody open from the 3-point line. Like they knew that they weren't going to get punished. So they had the freedom to try these things, and we would, and it's just kind of the freedom that we play. And so when you're not stressed or worried about getting taken out, I think you can focus all your energy on the positive of, okay, I have a decision to make. I'm just going to make the best possible decision. And I don't have to worry about this voice in the back of my head. I tell this story a lot about a player named Sean that I coached, or I was, his shooting coach or trainer or whatever you call it. And he, before his senior year started, he had already signed a Division I scholarship, and he was known as a shooter. And he got yelled at during his senior year so many times by his coach and benched so many times for shooting, even though he was the best shooter on his team, that he stopped shooting the ball. He finally realized, well, if I don't shoot, I don't miss. And if I don't miss, I don't come out of the game. So I'm just not going to shoot. And then I get to play the whole game. And so the coach took a player who was one of the best shooters in the area and made him into a complete non-shooter, because that's how he got to stay on the court, And so every time he caught the ball, he had like this, voice in the side of his head that telling him not to shoot, and that slowed down his decision. And it just, it stressed him and tensed him to the point where he couldn't make a shot anymore. And so, we tried to do the opposite of, we had a girl, I think she shot 12% from the 3-point line for the season. And I never told her to stop shooting. She finally came to me with about 10 games left in the season. Was like, Coach, I'm not going to shoot threes anymore. She's like, we got better shooters on the team. I'm like, all right. She's like, I think my passing's better. I'm like, okay, go for it. I was like, but if you're wide open, I don't want to see you, hesitating. Like, shoot the ball. And, and just having that freedom to play, like, I don't think it's magic, and then the second part of that is in practice, we just play all the time. So we put players in all the situations, hopefully, that they're going to see during games, whether that's facing, traps or, catching the ball with somebody closing out from a short distance or from a far distance or from an angle. We want to put players in all these different situations. That's why most of our drills are 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 5-on-5, so that we can get as many of these different situations to prepare for them. And so, we had a girl, I think she scored like 1.4 points per shot on highly contested 3-point shots. And part of it was we practiced so much with players closing out that she got so used to it that a player closing out, being close to her, no longer affected her in the same way that it would affect somebody who spends all their time in shooting drills with no defense. So I think those are the two biggest things. Is just, not criticizing players, giving them confidence, allowing them to play through mistakes. And then in practice, spending a lot of time, in these situations where they have to make quick decisions, just so that they acclimate to the speed of the game and to the process.
So how often in your practices do you emphasize minimizing turnovers? I love your system and style as it has reshaped how I teach the game, but I really struggle with the high turnover percentage. Any thoughts or advice?
And like I said, we turn the ball over a lot. It did get to a point this year where we started, we kind of had what we called bad turnovers or lazy turnovers, and we started to have to punish those just because we had a couple games with this team. I mean, this year all our guards were freshmen, so that's part of it, and we played like one of the toughest schedules in the nation. So, right from the beginning. So, it is what it is. But, some of the turnovers were just getting ridiculous. So, we did start to kind of punish, bad turnovers, things that were lazy, like a travel or, like we had a European point guard who liked to put the ball over her head, draw a defensive player to, come off a pick and roll and get a hedge or a trap, pick up her dribble, try to pump fake, and then throw to the opposite corner. Like she's great. She's a really, really good player, has great vision, sees everything, can run the pick and roll, everything I really want. But she struggled to adapt to how quick and how big the defenders that she was playing against were compared to what she was used to back home. And so she would bring the ball over her head, and she's trying to throw an overhead pass over a 6'3", future Division I, athletic, long player, and so things like that, she had, I think, 2 triple doubles this year where one of them was turnovers. So, things like that in practice, I started to get harder on her. I believe I yelled at her one time that if she couldn't stop turning the ball over, she wouldn't be a point guard anymore. But because she was our best shooter too, so we could always play her off the ball. So, this year we did try to rein in those turnovers a little bit. But like I said, I don't want to punish aggressive turnovers. So if we're attacking the basket, we make a turnover, it happens. If we're attacking the basket, we call for a charge, it happens. We'll talk about, okay, well, if you see that player rotate over, let's just jump stop there, jump stop, shoot over them, or let's stride stop and kick it out, or, whatever the solution should have been. But that's not something we're going to punish. It's not something we're going to yell and scream about or anything like that. But the traveling and some of the other kind of lazy turnovers, we did start to, kind of punish for those. And we did start to play, some games where we took a point away for bad turnovers or lazy turnovers. My judgment.
Okay, do you wait until players are proficient in endgame scenarios, 3 versus 2s and 2 versus 1s to incorporate sets, or teach them at the same time?
Just in the reality of it, kind of teach it in the same time. I would say at the junior college level, we're somewhat fortunate in the amount that we practice and when we could start and stuff like that. So we really would spend probably the first, we wouldn't really touch sets for the first maybe 3 weeks, of practice. Most of it was just playing and working on end game type stuff. So I guess I should say that I would wait until we're somewhat proficient in that stuff before putting in sets. But we're also starting work on on-ball screens and coming off screens and stuff like that right from the beginning. And so those are basically the actions that are going to become sets. To a certain extent, it's all together. I'm not waiting until we're proficient to move to, the actions that are going to ultimately create our advantage. But we're starting generally with, teaching an on-ball screen, teaching off-ball screen, teaching a dribble handoff, teaching cutting, whatever it is, first. And then ultimately, we're going to put in the actual sets that we use. So we teach the general, try to develop the skills, whether it's, the advantage stuff or whether it's the actions, and then, after a couple of weeks, that's when we start to put in actual sets.
That's the last one I have lined up at the moment. As I say that, someone's probably typing. Any other ones, guys? Because if not, we'll thank Brian for his time. And going back down the Blitz basketball. Yeah, when was the last time you talked about it?
It's been a while, actually.
Oh, here we go. I knew a Saba question was going to come in. Here we go. How would you go about explaining Saba to high school players new to the concept?
I mean, I don't think it's that complicated, you know, I mean, or complex. Like, I think everybody kind of gets the idea of a small advantage, right? So, and I mean, I kind of start it with transition play, right? So if we're running a 2-on-1 fast break, you know, what's our advantage? Well, you have 2 offensive players and 1 defensive player. Yep. Is that a small advantage or a big advantage? It's a big advantage. Yep. That's ultimately, in everything we're trying to do, that's what we're trying to create. You know, if we're running a on-ball screen in the half court, if we're running a off-ball screen, you know, ultimately, if we can get to a 2-on-1 situation, that's our big advantage. That's what we're trying to create. And so anything we do then is working towards getting to that point. Now, okay, so 2-on-1's a big advantage. What about 3-on-2? What about a 4-on-3? What about a 5-on-4? You know, and so most of our transition drills then also have, you know, the player running into it to make it even numbers. So 2-on-1 with you know, 4th player coming in to be the second defensive player. And so that kind of emphasizes, okay, so we've got a big advantage. We need to shoot before that 4th player gets there and makes it 2-on-2, because once we're 2-on-2, now we're neutral. Oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, same thing, 3-on-2, 4-on-3, 5-on-4. If we got 5-on-4 fast break, we have an advantage. It's probably a small advantage, but we have an advantage because we have an extra player. If we move quickly and we move the ball, we can create a big advantage pretty easily. If we slow up, we let that 5th player back, now we're neutral. And so, you know, I mean, just starting from that standpoint, you know, I think it's a fairly easy concept to get a hold of. And then as you put in the actions and stuff, then I think that's where it becomes a little bit more complex of how you're going to take small advantages and create big advantages and stuff like that. But I think the initial concept, when you show it through a transition situation, you know, I think it's fairly easy to comprehend.
Has your press approach remained the same?
No, because back in the day, we were probably even or more athletic than most teams that we played. My teams lately have not been. So we haven't been quite as aggressive pressing. We use some of the same ideas, just a little bit not quite as aggressive and usually more of a 3-quarter press. I would like to use, if I was in high school, I would use the same press. Last time I was coached in high school, I used the same press. But at the college level, I never got to the point where I felt like I had the personnel against the teams that we were playing against that we could be that aggressive. And when we played teams that tried to do it to us, we absolutely destroyed it. So
during this time of distance coaching, how are you teaching movement?
Well, I'm not teaching anything now because I'm not coaching. Because the college where I was at shut down athletics and I just moved. So I am searching for jobs. So yeah, I can't tell you how I'm coaching in the world of distance learning.
Good one. That's a good question, and everybody's struggling with it. So, Roland wants to know where or how he would get access to your Excel sheet to use to keep track of wins during practices. Where do you have that located, Coach?
My computer? I don't know. I can't remember if I put an example of the spreadsheet in, it would have been 21st century basketball practice. I know online there's an old blog that I have about the competitive cauldron that had the picture, although it might not anymore, of the index cards that I used to use before I had my own fancy whiteboard. But I mean, it's not a very extensive, if I'm talking to you on my iPad and on my computer, otherwise I would share it with you. I mean, it's not very fancy. It's really just an Excel spreadsheet that, let's see. So I basically I have two. I have one for my standings where I put in at the end of the week, and then the other one is kind of a week by week. And so I'm opening it so I can explain it. I think I have the players across the top. Yeah, so I have the players across the top. I have the drills in the left-hand column. And then under the players, I have a column for win and a column for losses. And so after practice each day, I just go and, so if today's practice, player one, won in one-on-one, they get one win, they were 1-0, and then everybody else lost in one-on-one. So everybody else gets a loss all the way across, and then 5-on-5, the 5 winners get wins, 5 losers get losses. And then at the end of the week, I take their weekly total, and then I go, where'd it go? I put in their weekly standings into my standings. And so my standings just have the week in the left-hand column and then the names across the top. And so the player one was 0 for 10 in the first week of the season. So I put in 0 for 10, and then player 2 was 6 of 8, or 6 wins, 8 losses, and all the way down. Yeah, I mean, it's fairly simplistic, but that's what I do. And then I just save them week by week. So I have every week. So, and then like at the high school level, I never kind of looked at it. I never kind of restarted the count. And one reason I did that is instead of punishing players for, like I remember when I coached a freshman team, we had a player who took off for a week in the middle of the season to go on vacation. And then he came back and he was a starter, and he came back and he never started again. And he's like, "You're punishing me for vacation." I'm like, "No, you missed so many points in the competitive cauldron that you're no longer, you got to work your way back up to get in the starting lineup." And so I didn't really have to punish him. The competitive cauldron punished him, like that week that he was gone, we had 4 practices, so, probably 40 possible points. Let's say some people will run 20. He went from, being a starter to now being, a bunch of points behind and trying to work his way back up. So it solves some problems in that respect. Because I didn't have to say, "Oh, well, you missed 4 practices, so you're not going to start, or you're going to miss 2 games, or you're going to, whatever." Like it was just, yeah, you're not a starter anymore. You can work your way back up there. I'm not punishing you. Just got to win some more in practice.
What are the biggest movement problems you see when developing a female athlete?
Just poor landing technique probably is a big one. Poor change of direction, just a lack of strength. It's usually a lack of, it's really a lack of reactive strength and poor foot contacts. So if you watch like repeat hops or repeat hops for distance, which, I've said repeatedly is my favorite exercise to watch, to judge for, typically for coordination. But in this respect, like you can see how heavy, like for instance, last year I was working with a girl who was coming back from an ACL and all kinds of problems because she had hurt it here, then she had gone home, to another country for a rehab and then come back. And so everything got messed up. And you could see she could will herself to basically be within the appropriate distance on a 3-hop test. But you could just see how different her movement execution was from foot to foot, like how slow she was coming off the ground on her injured leg, how, you could see like a little bit of almost lack of balance on the landing. And so those are the things that I see is just, if you get, especially a female athlete, but if you get an athlete who can really do distant hops with great coordination and movement, that is going to be an athlete that's going to be a basketball player. I've told the story before, but I worked a college exposure camp for a university for women. And, 50 girls, I'd probably seen 5 or 6 of them play during the season. So I was somewhat aware of them. But I more or less picked 2 at the beginning of camp, just based on the initial dynamic warm-up, but specifically watching them hop. And I picked 2. I was like, those are going to be the 2 best players in camp. And they were easily, by the end of camp, it was clear they were like 2 of the top 4 or whatever it was. Without really seeing them do anything with a basketball. It's just they move so much better than everybody else that you could tell they might not be there yet, but they had the prerequisites to be a good shooter, because their body just functioned well. It was coordinated. They moved well. Their foot contacts were good. They were quick off the ground. They weren't heavy on their foot. They didn't sit down into their landings. They could, really propel themselves forward, quickly with bounce. So all these things, it's hard to see, and it's obviously hard for me to explain, but that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm looking at players. But honestly, with young girls, it's as much as just the inability to do a squat, a body weight squat, I don't think I've had an American player reach me who could do a proper squat, in the weight room, when they arrived as a freshman or a transfer, and very few could deadlift properly. I would say we're half and half who could even skip. And that's at the college level, granted junior college, so we're not getting necessarily the cream of the crop, but, there's some significant movement issues there.
Next question's kind of twofold. I think you kind of answered it, but what's the difference between developing a male athlete versus a female athlete?
I always go back to when I first started, people talked about the biggest thing with a female is you have to convince them how good they are. With a male athlete, you have to convince them that they're not as good as they think they are. And that's kind of, I think that's changing a little bit, especially with male athletes, just in this day and age. I think there's a lot more insecurity, in 2020 than there was, maybe when I started coaching. But I think there's still something to that you really, males or boys tend to, as a very big stereotype, be more aggressive, be more confident, be more physical, be more confident in their bodies. Whereas, female athletes, especially younger girls, well, actually not at the youngest ages, there's really not much different. It's, kind of once, females start to develop and hit puberty and their bodies start to change. That's where the kind of the separation, because you can have a 9-year-old girl and a 9-year-old boy, and there's not a ton of difference. But once you get, to 10, 11, 12 years old, and you can start to see the differences. That's where I think a lot of the insecurities and the confidence and stuff like that changes. at least in my experience. You know, and so, you know, and so I think that just changes a little bit the approach that you take in terms of coaching. I mean, I know the last boys, when I first moved to Florida, I coached an AAU team. I mean, boys AAU team, like those guys were wild. And, you know, I mean, they were, you know, the meme of Nick Young shooting like a 25-foot three and then walking off like Steph Curry does, and then a bricks, you know, I mean, that was some of these guys, you know, like, and so, you know, it really was a matter of look, you definitely have potential to play in college, but you have a lot of work to do, you know, whereas I know from what, you know, my players have told me the last couple of years with the females, like giving them confidence is what really kind of helped them to reach their, you know, or close to their potential, or at least to improve and develop, was just, you know, kind of being told, you know, like I had a girl who was second in the nation in 3-point shooting, and she's, until she got here, she's like, I've never even thought of myself as a shooter. I'm like, what are you talking? You're shooting 50%, you know, on like 3 makes a game from the 3-point line, and you've never even thought of yourself as a shooter, you know, but it's something like, you're a shooter, shoot the ball. Like I yelled at her and took her out of games for passing up shots, you know, like, and so I just think that's kind of the major difference. And then physically the difference is, you know, guys tend to want to lift weights, girls tend not to want to lift weights, until once they've been taught and had success. I really don't have problems with girls in the weight room, like, or wanting to be in the weight room. It's always just initially there's the hesitancy. And I think that's because, you know, a lot of times, you know, especially like high school levels, you know, your strength coach, you know, maybe he's a football guy, and he teaches the weightlifting class at school, you know, or, you know, the girls are lifting with the football guys, and so they're maybe intimidated, you know, and they don't want to, you know, be lifting weights with them, or you know, whatever it may be, in that environment. So, you know, I mean, I know even the reason I didn't lift a lot of weights when I was in high school is because my strength coach laughed at me the first time I did a squat. So I never squatted again, you know? And so I think those same things will tend to happen, you know, with girls more than with guys. So, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why developing a female athlete is a little bit different, because they tend to have less exposure to strength and less of an emphasis on strength training and less teaching in strength training. And I think once they get those, then the differences tend to even out, you know, from the willingness to train and the willingness to work hard. You know, oftentimes even, you know, female athletes will go beyond and want to work more than a male athlete. But I think they have to be shown and taught a little bit more initially, whereas guys will kind of jump into it a little bit more.
I don't have anything else. Looks like I'm going to throw your link in here, Coach, from Lulu, that you put on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's hard for you to do it on an iPad, right? So.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah.
If you guys are interested in Blitz basketball, if they wanted to get in touch with you, Coach, how would they do it?
Just the Twitter is probably the easiest. You know, I mean, you can go to my website, 180 Shooter. It's just Brian at 180shooter.com is my email. But if you just message me on Twitter at Brian McCormick, it's usually the easiest.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay, that's how I got a hold of him. So, yeah, 180 Shooter 90, or it's 50, 40, 90.
Yep.
So, good stuff, Coach. Appreciate your time, and everybody coming tonight. Appreciate you coming out for System Basketball Virtual Clinic with Brian. So, awesome stuff. Has great products. So go check his stuff out. This will be on his, eventually up on his YouTube channel for replay, and it'll be on mine as well for you guys to, if you missed anything tonight. Okay. So we will be in, I'll be in touch.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.